Hey everyone, welcome back. I am really excited to introduce you to Dwight Franklin. He is an Eastern medicine physician. He also does functional medicine, and he's the founder of Functional Family Wellness Institute. His background is in traditional Oriental and functional medicine, and he specializes in children's brain and gut health, focusing on ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, and the genetic factors influencing a child's well-being. He's also a speaker. He also is an author of a book coming out called The Elementary Method: How to Solve Your Child's ADHD Case Through Natural Science-Backed Methods, offering parents a holistic approach to supporting their child's health. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Robin, for having me. Appreciate you
Uh,
having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start off with what got you into wanting to do children and brain health? What was the connection for you?
Yeah, so a little bit of a story here. I was going out to California to go to Eastern Medicine College, and it was a long way away. I originally grew up in Kentucky, so it was kind of like a big shock culturally to me being out there. And I got homesick and I came home, but it actually was one of the best things that could happen because I got to work as a craniosacral therapist. That was in my first career.
Ooh, okay.
I did craniosacral therapy for kids, and I got to work with this incredible psychiatrist who was in Evansville, Indiana. And he was, even this is like 2007, he was already doing like food allergy testing and food sensitivity testing, antioxidant testing, and various other tests for people with brain health concerns. And that was, very different than what most psychiatrists were doing back then, even now, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about just, professionalism, but I also learned a lot about functional medicine from him. And that I still ended up going to Eastern Medicine College down here in Florida, Orlando. And I always knew I wanted to work with kids. I got to see him work with kids, but even before then, I struggled as a kid. I struggled with anxiety. I mean, I remember, Robin, like feeling like everybody was looking at me when I was just trying to take a bite of food. It was that severe, that kind of
Mhm.
social anxiety. And I also struggled a lot with motivation and focus, and later on, even some depression. And I didn't want kids to go through what I went through. And yeah, so like that was my driving force, is just trying to help kids before they went through some of the things that I went through.
I love that. I think we often go through a challenge in life that kind of puts us on a completely crazy trajectory. We try to make these plans in our life, but it's like, oh no, God's got something different for you. That's a good reference to number one, make parents aware that, your children are going to go through things, but it's actually a challenge to help your entire family grow in some way. But I want to go back to craniosacral because
Yeah,
a lot of people don't know what that is. And
yeah,
I have had it a couple times. My kids have had it. And my daughter, when she came out, she was probably 18, 19 when she had it the first time. But she's like, I've never, ever been this relaxed.
yeah.
So can you explain what craniosacral is and how that would benefit kids?
Yeah. So craniosacral is it's a system of very light touch. And what it's intended to do is remove connective tissue restrictions around the brain, the skull, and all throughout the body and around the spine and spinal cord. This allows more cerebral spinal fluid to flow within that system, allowing more nutrition to get into that system, which carries your brain and all of its structures, right? So it's kind of an indirect therapy. It helps the brain by releasing connective tissue restrictions. Okay,
Mm.
so it's great for. I mean, I worked with a kid today who had torticollis. He came out, of his mother with torticollis, and his neck was like this, and we worked with him to help get his neck straight, right? Don't do as much of that kind of work as what I used to, but I still enjoy when I get to, because it's like you said, it's a very relaxing therapy. I see those babies when I work with them. They go from just screaming bloody murder because their necks all twisted, they're uncomfortable, and then you see them like straighten up and just like fall asleep. And that's just a nice thing to see.
It's very interesting that you said torticollis because I have not heard that word since my second daughter was born, but she
Yeah.
had it, and I didn't know about craniosacral back then, or I
Hmm.
definitely would have done it. But we ended up meeting a chiropractor who just had a very different philosophy. He wasn't your traditional chiropractor. And man, once we went to him and he got her aligned and all of the things and everything flowing, she stopped having upper respiratory issues. I mean, it was like, it wasn't magical, but it was magical for me.
Yeah.
Be like, oh my gosh, we've been suffering for no reason, but again,
Yeah.
when she was born, I just didn't know at that time.
Yeah.
So it's just funny you mentioned that word because I haven't literally heard it in 18 years. So
I haven't got to use it in a long time either.
um, so one of the things I talk about on the show is gut health, because I think it is, I know it's our second brain, but I think it is something that's so super important to be educated on because it drives a lot of our health and wellness. I know that you talk about gut health and the genetic influence on some of these conditions that kids get diagnosed with. Can you explain, every child or every human, because it's not just children, has a certain genetic makeup,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
our gut health is impacted by that?
Yeah. Well, the genetic testing that I do is more indirect to gut health, but we can see some different markers that we definitely need to look at.
Okay.
For instance, some people are more prone to inflammation. They're more prone to allergies. They're more prone to food sensitivities. And if they continue to eat those foods, they're going to cause tremendous inflammation within their gut, which that can have a cascading effect of problems after that, right? Certain people are not as prone to that inflammation. So that may be a win, a victory in their column. Other people have a very low functioning immune system.
Mhm.
And in those situations, and this is a low functioning immune system genetically. And if they have those genetic markers, then it may very well be that they're not able to fight off certain bacteria, certain candida in their gut. And we can help if we understand which gene is not functioning as well as what we would hope, the gene enzyme that is, then we can use the right type of nutrition to help make that gene enzyme function the best it possibly can, help boost that immune system so that we don't have any kids that are dealing with some dysbiosis, which is like a bacteria overgrowth, pathogenic bacteria overgrowth, or some candida overgrowth. I mean, you know this, Robin, some of the worst brain health disorders out there have been they're starting to link them to things like candida, and I mean, John Hopkins had a really nice study that linked schizophrenia with candida. So yeah, these are, there absolutely is this brain gut connection, but if we understand why that person is maybe more susceptible to getting these conditions, this candida, this dysbiosis, then we can absolutely help them correct that. And not just for right here and now, but maybe for the entire future of their lives, because we know what is going to work best for them.
Yeah, I love that. It's just like, for me, it's like knowing the genetics helps to understand who you are and how to support yourself the best that you can with what you have. There's that saying, we're all given genes and genetics, but it's the environmental stuff that kind of pulls the trigger on some of those things.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about candida, for people who don't know, we all have candida, but
Yeah.
the overgrowth that happens when you consume ultra processed foods or too much of the ultra processed foods, and you're not pooping regularly or just detoxing the things out of your body, you get an overgrowth of that. And that was another personal experience that I had with one of my daughters. I thought maybe she had ADHD. I just wasn't sure. Like, she literally couldn't hold her tongue, and it was just all of these things. And I thought, okay, but she's laser focused over here. But I'm like, I know it shows up differently in girls. So when I reached out to my pediatrician, he was like, well, let's check the gut first just to see. And she did. She had candida overgrowth. And
Yeah.
I tell you, we all did the elimination diet together, because I'm like, we all do it. It's like we're a family unit. And I was cooking, so that makes it a little bit easier. In 2 weeks, it was crazy what a difference.
Yeah.
Just from killing off the candida, eradicating it out of her body, and changing up her diet. Well, she didn't even crave the stuff she was craving because she was my sugar carb addict, and no matter how clean the sugar and carbs are, it's all she wanted to eat. It was such a fight, and it was like gone. It was insane. And so even now to this day, she's a little bit older. She knows when her body gets off and she's like, all right, I got to like pull back because I'm noticing. it was interesting because that was my first dive into like seeing what was going on in the gut. And I'm
Yeah.
fascinated. And I tell everybody, you should look at it because it's just it's expensive, but it's a fascinating test. And it tells you so much in your poop, and it's like, again, hate to talk about poop, but poop's an important thing. You
Very
got,
important.
and people don't get that because some kids don't go to the bathroom for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And that's so toxic, because you're just carrying around all of those things that need to be expelled out.
Yeah.
So I do want to touch on ADHD. I know it's a buzzword lately,
Hmm.
especially with the dyes, and the whole the red dye 40 and some other ones causing some of these symptoms. So explain to people how a diagnosis would come up and how you would tell if it's a true diagnosis or if it's something that's causing ADHD like symptoms.
Yeah. I mean, no disrespect to anybody with a different belief system out there, but I personally could care less about the ADHD diagnosis.
Mhm.
It's a starting point, I guess. I have to talk about it in terms of just sharing information because that's what people know, right? They know the term ADHD,
Exactly.
right?
Yes. Yep.
However, ADHD is just a abbreviation for a set of symptoms, and those symptoms can be greatly varied,
Mhm.
right? So we have kids that are having trouble focus, but there's no hyperactivity, no impulsive, no real behavioral stuff at all. And then
Mhm.
there's other kids that are just beating other kids up in the classroom and everything in between, right? You
Right.
even have kids getting diagnosed with ADHD that really are hyper focusing on
Mhm. Yeah.
certain things and certain
Yep.
activities, right? So they don't have a trouble focusing. They're just not focusing on what mom, dad, the teacher want them to be focused on, right?
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I don't care so much about the diagnosis. A patient or their patient parents can come see me whether they have a diagnosis or not. What I care about is why these symptoms are happening in the first place.
There you go. And I want to stop you for 1 second because
Yeah.
the whole diagnosis thing, it's just become a thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're diagnosed with this and you're diagnosed with this. And what that does to somebody is really, to me, destroys them
Yeah.
because they take on those things as that is who they are.
Yeah.
And that is not who they are. It is just
Yeah.
something for us to be aware of things that are happening inside their body that need to be tweaked, and
Yeah.
so the whole thing with anxiety, depression, yes, it's great that we understand things a little better, but I think putting labels on things really hurts children and adults alike, because you go by like, oh, I can't do that because I have ADHD. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you need different tools and skills and, tips to get through those things to
Yeah.
manage life because life is still going to keep going, whether you want to, come along for the ride or not. It's still going to keep rolling forward.
Yeah. And you even see people using these diagnoses just to put people down. Like,
Yeah.
oh, my ex-girlfriend was so bipolar. Oh, my girlfriend's so ADHD, and it's not like a true diagnosis. It may not even be that they really have anything near
Exactly.
that. It's just, they're aggravated at them or they're agitated at them and they just throw those words around and they're not really meant to be just thrown around like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I care about why these symptoms are happening. What I care about is the symptoms
Hmm.
because the symptoms can be incredibly varied. And if we just treat based off of ADHD, and this is what and I learned from a psychiatrist, so I'm not against psychiatry at all.
Hmm.
However, a lot of medical professionals are treating the diagnosis and not the person.
Yes.
And when that happens, you have a lot of room for side effects to happen. Because I mean, I've heard these stories. I see these kids that have anger and aggression, and they're put on a stimulant because that's what you do for ADHD. Well, how do you feel when you've had too much coffee? Do you feel
Right.
agitated, anxious, and angry? Well, what do you think a medication that's a stimulant is going to do to a child that's already got those symptoms? It's going to
Right.
push them further into that, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it's all about the symptoms. And I do, and I don't know how far you want me to go into this, but I do neurotransmitter testing and I do genetic testing to see with the neurotransmitter test, I get to see what the levels of the actual neurotransmitters are
Can you explain just in layman terms what
Yeah.
neurotransmitters are and which ones you look at?
Yeah. So neurotransmitters are those brain chemicals that give you emotions, give you thoughts, make things go in the brain, calm things down in the brain. You have what I call not what I call, what everybody calls excitatory neurotransmitters, which are like the gas in the brain. And then you have inhibitory neurotransmitters, which is like the brakes on the brain. And you need the proper amounts and the proper function of both of these to get a well-functioning optimal brain. Okay. So you may have some kids that are having high excitatory neurotransmitter activity, which are neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, maybe glutamates. Those are maybe too high, and they're having all of the symptoms associated with high levels of those neurotransmitters, which might be agitation, anger, frustration, anxiety, right? Over focusing, maybe over focusing on negative thoughts. And what I like to think of is like, think about a car going too fast. Maybe you got some nitro boosters on that car. That's maybe what's happening in that child's brain at that point in time, right? And they need to be calmed down.
So I want to touch on the dopamine
Yeah.
because these kids that are in this phone age where they're just scrolling through and scrolling through, it is literally constant dopamine hits. So they're almost triggering and training their brains to need more, need more, need more. So
Yeah.
of course those are going to be higher, which of course, I mean, even as an adult myself, if I do the doom scroll for a little bit, when I get,
Yeah.
I'm like, my brain is just fogged. So for the kids that have a developing brain, we think, oh, this is okay. You know, it's kind of like TV, you know, they just watch. But if you think about it, when you watched TV as a kid, you watched a full cartoon, you know, you watched
Yeah.
from the start and you didn't keep backing up and watching the same part about 50 million, maybe a couple times, but you know,
Yeah.
and then you had commercials. So your brain got a little downtime. And now the way kids watch TV is on their device and
Yeah.
it's probably not even, most of the time, not even a full show. And it's so it's just, there's so many different inputs than
Yeah.
what you and I had that is causing some of this. And also because the gut and brain are connected, if your gut is out of whack, your neurotransmitters are most likely not going to be as balanced as they could and should be. So,
Absolutely. You know, I always say that kids are being calibrated, their brains are being calibrated to never ending amounts of dopamine.
mhm,
And the way it works, I mean, basically, here's how I see it. They get on that device, they're using up dopamine. Okay.
mhm,
Dopamine feels good, and dopamine leaves you wanting more.
yes,
Okay. So when that kid is, and adults too, we're all guilty of this. I think me and you, Robin, talked about this. It's harder now to just watch a movie. Now we got to watch a movie and be on our phone at the same time,
which
right?
is cuckoo.
It's not right. It's not the
No.
way it should be. But a kid, they get on their device, that dopamine's being expelled, and then a lot of them are trying to go from that to their homework,
Mhm.
right? It
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Or
It
even
doesn't
that to a
work.
conversation with a
Or to a
parent.
conversation, or
Yeah.
cleaning their room, or just engaging with humanity. And it just doesn't work that way. You can't go from a more stimulating task to a less stimulating, less reward task and expect the brain to work properly. It just doesn't
Mhm.
work that way. You know,
That's a
you
good
can't
point.
save the world in a video game and go do your math homework afterwards and expect to be focused. Doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So for parents that are like, oh my gosh, my kids, whatever age they are, because it's all the way up to adulthood. I know that there are ways to have parental guides and time limits on phones and things like that. And again, we're asking our kids to navigate an adult thing at a
Yeah.
younger age that their brain is not fully developed. I mean, even my
Yeah.
kids in college, I'm like, you do yourself a favor, you know, don't go on your phone when you first wake up. It's just gonna hurt you for the rest of the day, kind of a thing. They have to go through it, unfortunately, because now they're 18 and older. But what is screen time appropriateness? What's the amount of time, generally speaking, letting them on for 30 minutes? What is a good rule of thumb to give a
Yeah.
parent?
I mean, I hate to be general like this, but it really depends on the kid and what they can handle. I have some parents that the kid has 30 minutes to an hour a day and he or she's doing relatively well. And is it optimal? Probably not. But they're not having all the crisis mode is over, right?
Mhm.
Maybe he was spending 3 to 4 hours a day before, right? So in those situations, take the victory, enjoy the less chaotic life, right?
Right.
In other kids' cases, parents see 10 minutes and that kid is bouncing off the walls or agitated and angry or just completely zoned out to the device in front of them. And how that kid responds greatly depends on neurotransmitters and what those neurotransmitter levels are. A kid who has naturally low dopamine, they're going to be really engaged in that screen, right? They may not hear anything else around them because they're so engaged because that for the first time that dopamine comes up.
Mm.
It's normally low and they're normally unfocused, unmotivated, but it comes up and now they're really focused and driven about that game, right? Or YouTube or whatever it is. If they have naturally high levels of dopamine, it's going to increase those dopamine levels higher, and you're likely to get a really agitated, aggressive child after that screen time. Okay.
Interesting. Okay. So it's a
So,
lot of bioindividuality,
mhm.
monitoring your kids, being aware of what happens after usage and monitoring, and I
Yeah,
think again, we've given our power away so much, and I would hate for this to be the one tiny thing missed when a child is trying to heal,
yeah,
because if it's really messing up their neurotransmitters, then you're trying to balance their neurotransmitters when really it's just this thing over here that needs to delete out of the life for
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
So again, I that's why I like your approach. Your approach is thorough for each individual person, but it's a lifestyle.
yeah,
And our lifestyle for ourselves and our kids has just turned very dysfunctional over the last couple of decades. And we really didn't know the repercussions of phones when we first came out, just kind of like cigarettes. We didn't know the repercussions until
yeah,
later on. But
yeah,
I feel like we're coming into the space where we now know. We know
yeah,
things that are happening. And so it's like we have to educate and talk about it so that parents can make better educated decisions about, what they're going to do with their kids. Um, Especially it's for everybody, but when you have a parent that's suffering, like their family dynamic is suffering because the child is really suffering, it just opens your eyes quicker and wider and faster. And it's not to say that the people who aren't maybe experiencing that shouldn't be on the same train, because they should, because eventually
mhm,
it will catch up with you at some point in your life.
yeah,
So I think these are just general things to think about through parenting. And you know
absolutely.
what? I was that parent, right? I was that parent that had that label. Maybe not so much for devices because I didn't really know. I mean, we didn't allow them on all the time, but in the food part of it, the personal care products, things, I was that person, and that's okay. I kind of welcomed after a little bit, just like, okay, fine, that's my new title, and I'm happy with it. But it is going through the uncomfortable to be comfortable. So
Yeah,
I want to talk about when a child comes to you and has some of these behaviors, whether it seems like ADHD, behaviors or autism behaviors or depression or anxiety. What are some of the lifestyle things and what are some of the diet things that you can recommend that any parent could try
yeah.
to help?
Yeah, well, the lifestyle, we've covered a lot of that already.
Right.
Diets, if they have more high excitatory neurotransmitters and they're angry and they're frustrated and they're agitated and anxious and all those things, then it may be that they need a little bit more carbs. I don't mean processed carbs. I don't
Right.
mean like Funyuns and Doritos and like, no, none of that, but real vegetables, real fruit, because those carbs help to get an amino acid in the brain called L-tryptophan. Some of you guys know L-tryptophan from like Thanksgiving turkey, right?
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So L-tryptophan turns into something called serotonin, and serotonin makes us go, everything's happy again. Everything's content again, right? So it can calm us down, okay? If they are one of the children who are more prone to being unfocused, unmotivated, not really got that get up and go about them, hard to get things accomplished, um, not really that agitation, aggressive. Maybe they're a little hyper at times, maybe a little impulsive at times, but it's all good natured. It's just being a little bit extra.
Mhm.
Then we need more protein and fat. Okay. Protein and fat help drive, focus, and motivation. And Robin, I saw you reposted something that I posted the other day, and I really appreciate that. Um, Carbs can ruin focus, especially when it's like these processed carbs. Okay, we all need some fruit and veggies in our life, but when we're eating potato chips and the bagels and the muffins and all of those things, and typically these kids are leaving the house eating those things. They're eating the cereals, they're eating the muffins and bagels, and they're not really getting eggs. Now, some people can be allergic to eggs or sensitive to eggs, and that's another story in and of itself. But if they're not, eggs is a great option. Breakfast meats that have no nitrates, that's another great option. But you're sending your kid to school with a diet that is going to promote low focus, right? So we just got to know these things. And I mean, I am more into now, I know Robin, you're the same way. I am more into teaching than anything else because we live in such a complicated world with a million different variables. I need my parents to know some things about this stuff
Yeah.
because I can't do it all. I need
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
give one personal story just
Yeah,
because,
please.
so my older daughter must have been like third grade. Now, she was the very compliant child. She was never behavior issue. She was the one in class that would kind of always read ahead, be ahead, all of those things. So she doodled a lot. So she doodled, she kept herself busy, but she was quiet. She never was a behavior problem. But one morning she said to me, "It's so weird, Mom, when I'm sitting on the floor in circle time, I feel like my legs are like jittery. Like I just want to get up and jump, and she's like, and it's just like a bizarre feeling." So I said, "Oh, okay." Well, she was eating cereal, and it's been her favorite thing. And it wasn't like a bad cereal. It was just,
Yeah.
she wanted cereal. I don't know. Again, I didn't know then I was learn every day. So I just like, you know what? Let's change up your breakfast for the next few days. And I don't know, let's just play around and see. So obviously, as soon as she left, I did all the research. I was like, oh, okay, she needs protein. And so we started just doing heavy like protein for breakfast. And the next week I was like, you notice anything different? Oh, she's like, yeah, it's so much better. She's like, I just, I feel like now I can just sit and chill. It was just an interesting situation that occurred. And you were just speaking, breakfast is your most important
Yeah.
meal. And even if you want to have carbs in your breakfast, if you are a kid that needs the carbs, it's going to be the fruit. It's going to be a vegetable. We
Yeah.
can have vegetables for breakfast. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so it's retraining our mom brains to go back to like what meals should actually look like. And again, not to any judgment of a parent, because we
Yeah.
do the best they can with what we have and what we know, but we need to learn different things because the things that we know are not really the best things all the time and are not
Yeah.
sustainable, and they're not providing our homes to be as healthy as they can.
Yeah.
So
And the fact is that a lot of us adults are doing the same things that's causing these kids to have such a problem with focus and their ability to, behave well in school and at home. And it may not affect us to the same degree because we're larger people and we've learned also our brain is more developed.
yes.
So we can, maintain a sense of I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that, right? However, it may affect us in a way of just saying anything new and different, we may throw our hands up and go, "Oh, I can't do that. That's too much trouble. That's too big." And no, it's not. It's really not. Let's just work at it. I don't ask my parents to make any dramatic changes all at once. Every single thing has to be just perfect. No, we do it in increments. And as long as we're working in increments at improving things, we're going to get to some really big changes in the end.
Right.
Both
So
with
I call it 1%. I call it 1% shifts.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
coined it as the 1% shift method because again, there is so much noise and there's so much varying opinions. And this doctor
Yeah.
said this, or this person said this, or my pediatrician said this. And it's becomes overwhelming and paralyzing. And
Yeah.
so by going with the thought philosophy of 1%, it's like we're not asking for these big, huge dynamic changes at first, but we are asking for just a tiny step forward. And when you start to see a win, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to change our breakfast. That's the only thing we're going to do for the next month. We're just going to change up and find 3 or 4 breakfasts that work for you and your family,
Yeah.
that makes sense for your children wherever they are and whatever their genetics and whatever their bodies need. And then you're going to get more confident that, oh, that's so easy to throw together. It's just, it is a learning process, but I think we're so inundated and busy, and the new term is, I don't have time. It's like,
Yeah.
well, how's it working for you?
Yeah.
What's your family dynamic like? Are you happy with where it is? And if not, then you have to grind a little bit, and it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but it's doable. That's what I want people to know. It's nowadays, it's such a blessing, because there are companies that want better things for people. So they're creating better swaps. And so if your kid really loves something and it's, not really fueling their body, we can always find a swap. Um, but again, when you start eating more whole foods and you kind of go towards that, they're not going to really want some of those other things anymore.
Yeah.
They'll naturally just fall away.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm just curious about your book. What drove you to want to write this? And then just don't tell us everything, but just give us a little snippets.
Well, what drove me to write this is, once again, I want to be an educator. That's my main goal. I can only help so many people by sitting across the desk from somebody, or even on Zoom, right?
Right.
Zoom's made things very convenient at times, but it's still one-on-one. And I think that this needs to get out there to the greater whole.
Masses.
Yeah, so that's what drove me to write it. What it's about is my journey working in this area, and everything that I have come across that has been helpful for families. We talk a great deal about the individual neurotransmitters, what they do, what it looks like when they're high, what it looks like when they're low. We talk a great deal about certain gene variations that may help to, or may cause problems with certain neurotransmitters. And we talk about ways to bring more balance to to that neurotransmitter profile. The right diet, the right supplements, the right lifestyle. So we cover all three. And it's not just one. It's not just, oh, take this for high dopamine or take this for low dopamine. It's about also changing your life too, so that you don't have to necessarily always rely so heavily on a supplement, right? I'm the supplement guy, right? Other medical professionals are doing medication, but we don't want those to be the only things that we're relying on. We want to be able to work with our bodies and take in the right foods and live the right lives, because we can make dramatic changes just doing that.
I love that.
Yeah, and we give step-by-step solutions to these concerns. So we, and we go over a lot of the reasons why people don't do this. And we try to break through some of those pushbacks, because let's be honest, like, that's probably the biggest factor in why people aren't making these changes. They just don't think they can do it. They think it's too big of a process. They think that they need success right now, and you can get success really quickly. It's not just, medication is not the only thing that can bring success really quickly, but to get that like long effect where for the life of that child, they know what's best for them. They're going to have a healthy life from 7 to 70, or hopefully later even than that. That's going to take some understanding about how your child's body functions and how their brain functions, and being able to impart that information on them as they grow older. And so, yeah, it really just is giving them what I've learned over the last 14 years of doing this, and helping them to be what I call a brain health detective for their own child. Yeah,
I love that.
I don't like calling myself any type of doctor. I'm your child's brain health detective. I'm not their doctor. And when we work in that manner as a detective, just trying to figure out, okay, what's going right, what's going wrong, it takes some of the stress out of it, because you're no longer just trying to fix your child. You're trying to understand your child. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So that's what I found to work beautifully. And when parents work with me on that level, we really get some beautiful experiences and some beautiful success. We have to get that child better by tomorrow, because their school's angry, and my friends don't know what to do about my child's behavior. Like, that's got to be pushed aside for a second. Yeah. We've got to worry about what's going to be the best solutions for that kid in the long haul.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And, like you use that detective because for anybody who knows me, and listens to the show, it's like, it always goes back to the basics. You have to know what you're eating. You have to know what you're putting on you have to know the ingredients. You have to be an ingredient detective. And as many texts that I've gotten over the last, 10 years, is this healthy? I don't know. I have to see the ingredients. Once you show me those ingredients, I can tell you right away if it's something that would be fueling for your body or something that would not be fueling. And
Yeah.
then I try to explain to them what it is do I look at, and so for you, when you
Mhm.
are helping parents decipher through some of that, because it is challenging when,
Yeah.
you look at those long lists of ingredients and you're like, what the heck does any of that even say and mean?
Yeah.
You know, I always have I have 5 that I go like, these are my non-negotiable no's, automatically. And if those are in there, then it's not even something I'm going to entertain. And at this point, because I have been doing it for a long time, it was very challenging in the beginning. My gosh, it was like, and again, there weren't these companies that were doing better things. So it was a struggle. But
Yeah.
now that I am where I am, I don't even think about it. When I go to the grocery store, I don't even look at those items anymore because
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you, but again, I am still getting duped here and there every once in a while. I'm like, darn it, I
Mhm.
thought this was, and then I'm like, "Ugh." But what are your non-negotiables for things that really, whether they're a trigger or not, they're just not healthy
Yeah.
ingredients?
Food dyes, nitrates, and MSG. And those are really my big ones.
Okay.
Synthetic food dyes, to be
Yes.
specific there. Yeah, they just create incredible inflammation in the body and in the brain. I mean, you had a great documentary shown a couple 2 3 weeks back. I mean, that was phenomenal. But that's what I see with my kids when they have these synthetic food dyes is just tremendous neuroinflammation. And I think I was thinking about this after that. I talked at your documentary showing, and I, had a couple of minutes, but I was thinking on the way home, I was like, I wish I had mentioned this. A lot of parents are relating what happens when their kids have these foods with like the symptom, which is,
Mhm.
oh, they get a little hyper. It may not be like this big tremendous
Mhm.
experience like it was for some of the families in the documentary. Maybe they're a little bit frustrated after eating a food dye. Maybe they're a little bit hyper after eating a food dye, a little bit unfocused after eating a food dye. But what I want the parents to think about is not that focus dropping a bit or hyperactivity increasing. What I want them to think about is their kid's brain has tremendous inflammation on it in that moment.
Mm. I like
That
that.
that is, very telling. Showed or told a story about a little boy that I had treated who, um, a very angry kid, came to us, and when we took out all the food dyes, and we did that indirect, we didn't mean to just take out food dyes specifically. We just got him eating very clean, and the food dyes just naturally went away. And that kid was doing phenomenal for a long time. And then they came back, and he was on a small amount of medication, and that little tiny 1 milligram pill was enough to make this kid go back to all of the behaviors that he had before. Well, we got rid of that. Me and a personal friend that was a pediatrician found another medication for that child that was without the food dyes. But a couple weeks later, actually, it was a couple months later, this child got sick over in a different country, and he had to go on a medication then. And it had food dyes, and the parents were like, I don't, what do I do? He's sick, but this is all we have. So they tried it again, and he said, this was the exact words that he said as to his mom, Mom, it feels like my brain's on fire.
Mm.
And if you look at that word inflammation, in means internal, flame, you know what that means. Okay. So it's not just being, how do I say, we're not just being like dramatic when we say it's actually causing a fire in the brain.
Yeah.
And
And even in the movie, the kid said, his brain was buzzing. It's the same
yeah,
thing. It's
brain was
so
buzzing.
I really, I had the goosebumps. I really think that's such an important fact to point out because you're right. We all look at the outward symptoms, even though we know we know the root cause would be that something happens in your body that is affected by the dye from the dyes. And that gives that trigger to the body system. And then all hell breaks loose sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. And I loved that you just said that is really looking at what's happening internally to the brain of the child that is having those outward. No child wants to misbehave. Let's be honest. No child wants to do things. And then when they finally calm down, they realize, like, what did I just do? Like,
Yeah.
no kid is born innately to be vicious, and that happens sometimes when they're being affected. And it's different from an allergy. So I want
Yeah.
people to understand that an allergy is different than when kids have an exposure to synthetic dyes and they have a reaction to it. It's not an allergy.
Just inflammatory
There
for
you go.
the
Thank you.
entire system.
We're picking on food dyes here because there's no nutritional value in food dyes. It's got nothing. I mean, I don't even know why it's still around at this point, and I feel confident that in the next decade it will be gone, or at least have a warning label for people to have a choice and understand their choice. But the seed oils and the in the garbage foods, like you said, like nitrates, and there's just a lot of things. But one of my hard no's is natural flavors, because to me it's a loophole. It's a loophole term, like fragrance. They can make it a quote unquote proprietary blend and not disclose. And so I think for me that's a hard no. If you're not going to be truly transparent, why would I want to consume your food? I mean,
I in those cases, I really tell parents to avoid. And the only times that I may be a little bit lenient on that is if I know the company and they can call that company and find out exactly what's in it.
100%. And I will tell you, I've done a lot of calling and emailing over the last 10 years just because I'm not afraid to. And I'm like, I want to know. And if you're going to tell me it's a proprietary blend and you're not willing to really disclose what is actually in there. But this is what I just learned recently from a gal I had on who manufactured gummy bears. She made them, but her manufacturing experience was very eye-opening to hear, because there was a situation and they said, it's okay, we can just drop a little bit of this in. And she was like, no, I don't want to do it. And they're like, oh, it's okay, we don't have to put it on the label. And she's like, seriously, you think that's why I don't want it? I want to be able to eat my gummy bears and I'm not going to eat it if it has this in it. Like, are you crazy and kidding me? So again, the transparency needs to be much better than it is. There needs to be 100% transparency. You can't just drop a little bit of TBHQ and not put it on your label. It's just so, but carrots don't have a label, right? Because there's not a bunch of stuff. I mean, you have to look at the sprays and you have to look at that stuff like the organic. But what I tell people is, if you're tired of reading ingredients, then just go to the section that doesn't have it, which is your fruits, your vegetables, your meats. Yes, you still have to peek, but it's just not as dramatic, right? You're not going to have 22 things on the label because they come from the ground, they come from the earth. And so again, there's some discrepancies and kids do react to some of the chemicals that are sprayed and all of that. But a general rule of thumb is it's healthier than, eating a box of basic garbage.
Yeah. I mean, that's, parents will ask me, what's the best diet for my kid? And in most of those situations, I'm telling them, okay, if you want to know the absolute best, it's some really high quality meats and some really high quality vegetables with a little bit of fruit.
Yep.
That's
healthy
beautiful.
fats.
And healthy fats. Absolutely. Cooking with healthy fats.
Yep.
That's the perfect. Now, will they go to that level? Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
That's it. So that there's like two thought processes I have. The 1% shift, I think, is great for a lot of aspects and for a lot of family dynamics. But when you're suffering to an extreme, and you're ready to do anything because you've been around the block 22 times and nothing's helped, you are going all in, and you will do anything and everything to save yourself, your family, your child, and make things healthy again. So, there's two thoughts that you can go by, and neither one are right or wrong. It's really bio-individual.
No, and it's absolutely okay to go slower, but you just have to understand that maybe the dramatic changes are going to take a little bit time to be produced, right? But you're going to get there. So just don't let your emotions override what your brain's telling you. Let your brain do its thing, where it's saying, you know what, we're going slower, so it's going to take a little bit longer, right? But yes, you can make the big changes right off the bat if you feel confident with doing that and you feel like you can make that happen. And yes, the changes are likely going to be a lot quicker in those cases.
Mhm.
So, but just don't beat yourself up over which way you choose, and
Correct,
just
because neither are right or wrong.
keep
Yep.
things in perspective,
Yep.
right? Of
And you
course,
might
we're
go
not.
all in. You might go all in, and then you might have, a day or a time where, you allow something, and then you will see how the body will react. And I think
Yeah,
a lot of times that needs to happen for you to truly understand, oh wow, like we have come such a long way
yeah,
from where we started.
yeah.
And again, parents need to give themselves grace as they learn, as they walk through this journey with their kids. Um, but I also just want to mention, because you had mentioned medication, it's not just food. It is cleaning products, it's candles in
Mhm.
your home, and even whatever you're washing your kids with.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of things to learn and to get educated on. So it's not just a one-stop shop. It is a whole lifestyle
yeah,
approach to healing your body. Um,
absolutely.
and little by little, things will be revealed to you as you can handle them.
Well said, my friend.
I do feel like we get a little bit, we take a little bit, we learn a little bit, the next thing pops up and the next thing. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
just,
Even for me,
yeah,
I
of course.
mean, me and you talked a couple weeks back or somewhere around there, and I was, sharing with you that there are different types of magnesiums that can make or break a treatment process. I've had magnesium in one form make a kid dramatically worse, and they're like
Yeah.
anxiety. And I've had the same child do dramatically better with magnesium, but just in a different form. Same
Hmm.
thing with B vitamins. In one form, it may make things dramatically worse. In another form, it may make things dramatically better. These are all things that I have learned throughout the years because I've
Right.
been doing this longer than most people,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's some research into some of these things, and I can find that research after the fact. But
Hmm.
I learned a lot of it just by working with kids, seeing with some understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But there maybe, maybe a kid didn't respond well to that type of magnesium, so we had to use another. And then, oh, well, that was the success, right? So, yeah, like you said, don't beat yourself up over not knowing every little thing, and don't feel just like you got to learn everything all at once. Just do your best. Keep learning, keep learning. Even I'm having to do that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the day you stop learning, you're not living. I mean, to be honest, or you're very set in your ways and you don't want to grow anymore. I appreciate everything you're doing for all the families here in Central Florida. And I'm sure you can even work with people outside of Florida since you can do some virtual.
Yeah.
So I'm going to drop all of your information in the show notes for people to be able to contact you. But the work that you're doing is hard and it's draining and it's brain intensive and it's feeling intensive and it's all the things. So we want to know from, your standpoint, what do you do for yourself that are non-negotiables every day to feel your best?
Well, I'm very lucky to have a really wonderful girlfriend that I can go home and, just talk to. And she's so wonderful at helping me to relax. Because you're right. You're dealing with a lot of families that are going through like the worst thing they've been through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love working with these families, going for walks. Running can sometimes increase stress, so just going for walks out in nature, like that has been just tremendous for me recently. And then I avoid things. I avoid coffee. Like I used to be a big coffee drinker. I said, said that I had troubles focusing. Coffee made my focus so much better, but it brought the anxiety with it. So I
Mm,
have to avoid certain things, certain stimulating things, because it does make my anxiety and anxiousness worse. And it'll be hard for me to work with families that are dealing with all of this anxiety about their situation if I myself am feeling tons of anxiety, right?
right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, walking and eating healthy. I mean, we cook at home every night. We broccoli and just the organic meats and sweet potatoes, and that's kind of like our staple. We don't venture too far out from that on a regular basis. It's a meat, it's a vegetable, maybe some fruit here and there, but I mean that's basic. And cooking with healthy olive oil or avocado oil, that's what we do. So we try our best to do what we say for others to do.
Yeah. But, and honestly, you find out what makes you feel your best. And when you do find those things that make you feel your best, when you stop doing them for a little bit, you really recognize
Yeah,
like, oh, wow, you know what? That actually was really cool. And that makes me feel more energy. And now I haven't been doing that. And now I feel like junk. So that's an interesting. So again, I think you got to get to the feel good to feel what that really feels like. And then you start to put into perspective
exactly.
what does it
Exactly. You
feel?
don't know you feel good if you never felt good before, right? You don't know what feeling good
100%.
feels like.
Yeah.
I'm from Kentucky. I didn't eat like this when I was a kid.
A
Yeah,
hundred. No, I don't think anybody
that's
did.
well, I mean, I always say to my patients, and I say this in the book, I didn't grow up eating like this. So if I can make the change, just about anybody can.
Yeah.
I ate chicken nuggets from McDonald's.
Yeah.
I ate chicken or McDonald's hamburgers. I
Yeah.
ate KFC on Sundays and Pizza Hut on Saturdays. And that was my life, and tons of Mountain Dews and everything. I did it all.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know that I was really feeling bad at the time. Just like you said, I didn't really know. I just thought that's how you felt, right?
Right. Yeah. Of course.
I was falling asleep at my desk every single day in high school. I went from a straight A student earlier in my years to like struggling to get through. And I was falling asleep all the time, but I was also drinking like a ton of sugar that
Right.
was doing this to my blood sugar, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I've made these changes. It's what works for me, and yeah, because I'm from Kentucky and because I had a way of being. I might fall back every once in a while on something that was
Feels
it
homey.
feels good or whatever from my childhood, but I feel bad when I do those things, and so I don't do those things anywhere near as often as I did when I was a kid. Almost never.
Yeah. And again, I think it's a growing learning experience, and you get to know yourself a little bit better, and you get familiar with what works for you when you take the time to be aware, when you stop the rush and the chaos, when you get still and you have the interconnection with yourself. And I think that's what's lost so much now for a lot of people,
Yeah,
adults especially. It's like that, just the rat race of just craze. And we just have to really learn to be still again and really listen. And our bodies are talking to us, whether you're falling asleep at your desk, whether you have a headache every day, whether you have a stomach ache, if you eat such and such, like those are your body telling you, if you are constipated, your body's talking to you. If you have diarrhea, your body's talking to you. So we just forget to listen because we just run to somebody who we think is going to give us the answer to get better. And
yeah,
not to say that sometimes you don't need to go and get a medication if you have something, but we've got to just take the control and that, power back and know that we can do a lot of things just by getting still and listening. And then
absolutely.
finding the core group of people to work with. And I think that's where you fit in. And I am appreciative again, for everything that you do for, the kids in our area, because there needs to be more people like you. And I know that on probably most days, you're fried from one end to the other because there are a lot of families suffering.
Yeah,
But, those families are super thankful, I'm sure, for the coaching and the services and the wealth of knowledge that they're going to get and the healing that they're going to get by working with you. So, um, on your worst day, remember how many families you're impacting, because it's truly, you know, a gift for them.
thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously you guys are walking away with a ton of 1% shifts that you can try on this week, next week. And if you are, in that phase of I'm ready to do something different, make sure that you reach out to Dwight, because he will give you some of the structure that you might need to figure out, what's happening to you, to your child, and to your children within your family. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I can't wait
Thank
for your book
you.
to come out. We'll link it in the show notes. We'll link where you can find him. Have a great week, and I will talk to you guys soon.